Why is Hitchcock the master? Why you've been referred to, Brian, as the new Hitchcock and so on?
Well, because Hitchcock, I think, pioneered a whole type of film grammar. He taught us how to express things as clearly visually, I think, as they can be expressed. It's like good grammar. You either speak well or you speak badly. You either write clearly or you don't. And he does it. And when he's expressing an idea or a whole cinematic sequence, he puts the camera in exactly the right position. He has exactly the right shots. And everybody else is sort of muddle-headed and bird-brained, basically, and in relationship to him.
Yeah.
Throughout the 70s and 80s, Brian De Palma earned his place as one of the most respected thriller directors in Hollywood, with especially positive reviews from Roger Ebert and Pauline Kael. In films like Sisters, Carrie, Dressed to Kill, Blowout, and Body Double, De Palma made his mark by taking the tropes and techniques established by the master of thriller cinema, Alfred Hitchcock, to the next level.
I dare say you are wondering why I am floating around London like this.
While some of his films stand among the most iconic and influential ever made, Hitchcock was restricted by the Hays Code. All the violence and degradation in the films of his heyday got filtered through strict censorship. By the time the code was replaced by the MPAA rating system in 1968, Hitchcock's best filmmaking years were behind him, so he couldn't take full advantage of the American cinema's newfound creative freedom. That's where De Palma stepped in. De Palma borrowed heavily from the Hitchcockian playbook. His stories are driven by crime and violence, they often have shocking twists and turns, and he uses the camera as an omniscient, unbiased observer. But what allowed De Palma to supersede Hitchcock was the MPAA's leniency. Unlike Hitchcock, De Palma's films weren't tethered by censorship. Censorship was so tight when Hitchcock made Psycho that a shot of a flushing toilet generated controversy. De Palma's films essentially imagined what Psycho would have looked like if Hitchcock had no rules to follow. If he didn't have to shoot chocolate syrup in black and white, what could he have done with bursts of crimson blood?
But one of the reasons, in particular, why I responded to De Palma in a way that I didn't to Hitchcock is, and in particular, it was I'd said in the piece, I did feel the 50s morass of filmmaking held him down. Hitchcock really couldn't do what left to his own devices, I think he would have wanted to do. By the time he could do it in the late 60s and the early 70s, he was just a little too old. But if he could have gone where he wanted to go in the early 60s and through the 50s, he would have been a different filmmaker. Well, by that token, Brian De Palma was able to go where he wanted to go. He was able to explore the artistic minutia of the set pieces, of the violence. The fact that Pauline Kael, amongst others, said that the X-rated version of Dressed to Kill was better than the R-rated version, even though it was only a couple of frames and a couple of seconds from the elevator scene in particular.
The shower.
But those few seconds made all the difference in the world. You didn't see him cut her up the middle.
Right, which you do in the X-rated version.
Which you do in the X-rated version.
Yeah.
And well, that's an important stroke.
Completely.
Literally an important stroke in the film.
Yeah. Some of De Palma's Hitchcockian homages are more obvious than others. He's recut and reimagined Psycho's shower scene every which way. He bookended Dressed to Kill with spooky shower scenes. He included a shower scene in the film within a film in Body Double. And he spoofed the Psycho shower sequence with a plunger instead of a knife in Phantom of the Paradise. The indoor amusement park scene in The Fury puts a supernatural spin on the climax of Strangers on a Train. Sisters and Dressed to Kill in particular borrow heavily from the structure of Psycho. They both exhibit the old protagonist switcheroo. The first half of Sisters follows Danielle before shifting its perspective to Grace, the journalist who believes Danielle's a murderer. And Dressed to Kill follows Psycho even more closely in this department. The location of the murder is changed from a shower to an elevator, but just like Psycho, the A-list leading lady, Angie Dickinson, the Janet Leigh of the 80s, is killed off long before the end credits, before the camera scrambles to find a new protagonist to focus on. Dressed to Kill even has the same ending as Psycho, as a psychiatrist explains the mentality of the killer. In this scene, Dressed to Kill also evokes the gender confusion themes of Psycho, although its depiction of transgenderism as a kind of dissociative identity disorder with a side of murderous rage is way off base.
You See, there's some men and women, too, who think they're born in the wrong body. They're called transsexuals. And all they want to do is have their sex changed.
Body Double doesn't switch its protagonist at the midpoint, it switches the Hitchcock thriller it wants to emulate. It starts off as an homage to Rear Window with a voyeur spying on his neighbours, but it skews more towards Vertigo when it turns out that the seductive woman Jake has been watching was hired to catch his eye in order to frame him for her murder. Plus, Jake's debilitating claustrophobia is used as an obstacle the same as Scotty's acrophobia in Vertigo. Like Scotty, Jake has to overcome his fear in the final reel. Blowout is more of an homage to Antonioni's paranoid thriller Blow Up than any particular Hitchcock film, with nods to its Watergate-era successor Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation. But the final chase is pure Hitchcock. In his review of Blowout, Roger Ebert wrote, "A chase through Philadelphia on the anniversary of the ringing of the Liberty Bell reminds us of two Hitchcock strategies. His juxtaposition of patriotic images and espionage, as in North by Northwest and Saboteur, and his desperate chases through uncaring crowds remind us of Foreign Correspondent and Strangers on a Train." Carrie, arguably De Palma's finest film, sticks pretty closely to Stephen King's source material, but Pino Donaggio's music in Carrie was heavily inspired by Bernard Herrmann's unforgettable Psycho score. Like Herrmann, Donaggio uses piercing violin strings to punctuate big scares. Carrie also recreates Vertigo's dizzying 360 camera spins when Carrie and Tommy are dancing at the prom before she's covered in pig's blood. At his best, De Palma presents audiences with Hitchcockian thrillers that are as dark and grisly as 1972's Frenzy, but still as sharply constructed as 1943's Shadow of a Doubt. De Palma might borrow the setups from Hitchcock, but his blood-soaked payoffs are the product of a changing cinematic landscape. De Palma was the master of the macabre for a new generation.
Have you consciously duplicated Hitchcock effects?
Sure. Sure. I mean, in learning how to try to use that grammar, I've very much tried to look through his eye, and I think now have sort of evolved a kind of grammar of my own. But I mean, if you want to know anything about cinematic storytelling, I mean, he's it.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.